There's a war going on. This war has claimed so many people. It's the thing that hinders all of us, the things that we most need to do. When we need to start that business, when we need to go into a new environment, when we need to accomplish great tasks, this war comes up over and over and over again. What's up, travelers? Prinston coming to you from the Cineverse, and today I want to talk about the war of emotions. Now, what is the war of emotions? The war of emotions is basically the battle every day to make ourselves do the things we need to do. Now, I'll say that again. The war of emotion is the battle every day to make ourselves do the things we need to do. Now, why is this important? Well, the simple reason is if you can't make yourself do the things you need to do, you're not going to accomplish much. I remember talking to a photographer once. He takes a lot of pictures, and I asked him, do you have Instagram? Is there any place I could see more of your work? He said, I don't have Instagram. And I asked him why. He said, I don't have time. I said, but Instagram is probably one of the greatest places to put things like pictures and maybe short videos. He says, you know what? I know I need to do it, but I just don't have time for it. I know I need to do it, but I simply don't have time. But what they're really saying is they don't have time for that. And this is one simple example of not making ourselves do the things we need to do. This comes up in business so many times. People don't have the courage, or they don't have the willpower to make themselves do the things they need to do. And of course, if you're not able to make yourself do the things you need to do, you're not able to put that force out into the world, you're not going to accomplish much because you just can't push through the barriers that are stopping you. The first thing that we have to understand when it comes to battling the war of emotions is that we have to make ourselves do the things we need to do. But why? What is the reason? Where does this spawn from? Why do we limit ourselves in doing the things we need to do? And the reason I would tell you the biggest reason is the interpretation you give to the things that happen in your life, the events, the story you tell yourself about the things that happen to you. And of course, once you change the story, you can change your outlook on life. I remember reading in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they talked about there's a gap between stimulus and response, meaning that when something happens to you, there's a time where you can choose your response to it. So basically, you could choose your interpretation. And your interpretation of events is what causes the events to have a meaning. So anything that happens to you, you could lose a job. There could be a death in the family. All these things are built up on some interpretation that you have of them. Maybe that you believe because you've lost your job, that your life could never be the same. You could never get back to the prosperity that you felt you had. Maybe a family member's gone. Now that leadership, whatever they had, is completely taken away. You think there's no way you could ever get that type of comfort, that self-assuredness again. But all of these things are stories you're telling yourself. And once you change the interpretation, then you change the whole perception of how you look at things. Now, this once again goes back to the emotions. Our emotions come up and they start to distort our view on things, distort our view on how we look at life. And the biggest reason people can't get over things, or they can't make themselves get to another level, is because the war of emotion keeps coming in over and over again. Over and over again. We put these interpretations, we play these mental movies, we put stories back and forth about how things should be. There's 2 areas I think people live in life. That's the world that they want it to be, the ideal world in their mind that they make up in their head, and the world that actually is. And this once again goes to the stories they tell. Just because you failed doesn't mean that you're going to fail in the future. Also, just because you succeeded in the past doesn't mean you're going to succeed in the future. But the story you tell yourself is that things have to be consistent in that way. And your interpretation is making you look at things in the wrong way. So you have to firstly change your interpretation of events in order to get yourself in the right headspace and think how you need to think. So what does this really lead to? What's really holding us back? What's the biggest thing that most of us struggle with? And that's the ego. We have to annihilate the ego in order to get to the next point. Now, the war of emotions is holding on to that ego. We hold on to an ego, a person who we think we are. Now, what is your ego? Your ego is basically the set of thoughts and beliefs, or the person you think you are, the person you think you are today. For example, you may say, well, I'm an introverted person. And this is probably the most common thing I hear all the time, that I'm an introverted person and I don't really like to put myself out there. But you know you need to put yourself out there, and you don't do it because you're still holding on to an identity of who you used to be. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was asking him about selling a product. And he told me, well, I don't really want to sell the product because I don't want to sell it to people I know because it just feels wrong or doesn't feel right. And I told him, well, the only reason it doesn't feel right is because you must not believe in the product you're selling. And I said, is it a good product? Is it something that's going to benefit that person's life? He said, yeah, it will. It definitely will. Then why wouldn't you want to sell it to them? I always look at it, if it's something that's going to benefit somebody, it should be your obligation to get it to them. But your ego is telling you what? Oh, I'm not the person who sells like that. I'm not the person who goes out and puts myself out there. I'm not the person who gets on a camera and talks. I'm not the person who takes pictures. I'm not the person who puts myself on social media. You're still holding on to the previous identity of yourself. And the crazy thing is that in order to become the new person or become the person you want to be, and I'm not talking about changing who you are in the sense that you have to leave people or that you have to somehow act different. What I mean is you have a vision for yourself and you want to become that person. And in order to become the person you want to be, you're going to have to let go of the old person. The old person essentially has to die because the new person that you are and the person that you are today cannot inhabit the same space. And your ego is going to hold on to the old person. When you get that feelings and it feels like it's something that you don't do, you don't push through it, that's your ego. It's holding on to the old version of yourself. And until you can let that go, you're going to always be the same person. Always. So our ego tells us we're a person. We build that identity up from childhood, and we've been told that we're a certain person, that maybe we're introverted. We've been told that we're a person who doesn't put themselves out there. Maybe you've had people around you've never had to speak up. Maybe you've never had to be a leader. And you've told yourself that you can't be these things. So when you try to do these things, your emotions tell you you're not that person. Stop. You're not that person. What the hell are you doing? Sit down and be the person you are today. And we believe that story. And we believe our ego. And we can't push through to become the person we want to be. We have to annihilate that old version of ourselves in order to become the person we most want to be. What's the last place that the war of emotion shows up? And most people who've done entrepreneurship for any period of time will recognize the fear of failure or the fear in general. Now, when you go out to do something, there's a certain way that you look at it. You can look at an event that happens in your life as a failure, or you can look at it as a success, or whatever you want to look at it. But most people who are successful, and most people who attain anything, I've had friends that come from very poor backgrounds, and they've been able to attain lifestyles that some people would really covet and really dream about. But one thing they always say is that they learned from all their failures. See, the person who looks at every failure and interprets it, like I said before, interpretation is key. Interprets it in the correct way, then there's nothing that can stop you. Think about it. If every time you fail, all you do is take it as a learning experience. You say, well, today I failed at this. Let's say you want to be a public speaker and you get up and the first time you got out and did public speaking, your speech was horrible. It's the worst thing, like you're just completely embarrassed. People laughed at you. Worst case, people laughed at you. They're throwing tomatoes on the stand, right? Like the old cartoons. You can look at that and say, well, I'm a terrible person. I should never go speak again. Or the other option is that you can look at your speech and say, what did I learn from that situation? What can I take from that situation and use to build myself up further? Same thing in business. If you put a product out and nobody liked your product, instead of saying, well, this product could never sell, maybe you need to tweak the product. Maybe you need to look at some of the ways that you could possibly make the product better, and then people might want to purchase it. And anybody who takes this mindset, anybody who's able to look at themselves and be self-aware of their failures and be realistic and be honest with themselves about why they're failing, and then they adjust to those failures, they're going to be able to accomplish the things that they need to accomplish. But the thing that stops us, once again, the war of emotions. Our emotions tell us that if we fail, it's because something's essentially wrong with us. We've identified with some state, some ego, that maybe we're a successful person. Maybe you succeeded in the past. Maybe you're a person who always succeeds, and the first time you've ever faced a failure, you just can't deal with it. I've seen this a lot of times. People just can't deal with the failure. You build up that ego, you build up that identity that says you're this person. But once you let go of that, once you're not trying to live up to any standard, then you just operate. You just get into the process of doing things. And by getting into the process of doing things, you get to that higher level of mastery, that higher level of attainment. The war of emotions is probably one of the greatest hindrances to anything, to any type of attainment. Us holding on to emotions that really don't serve us. Using things that really don't benefit our lives. Every day is a battle. Every day. Everybody faces it. I face it. You face it. Anybody you know faces a war of emotions. But the only thing that separates the people who accomplish the things they want and the people who don't accomplish the things they want is they are not defined by those emotions. They press through those emotions anyway to build the things they want to build. You have to win this battle. In order to get to where you want, you have to win this battle every day. It has to be your personal responsibility to win the war of emotions every day. The battle is fought in the trenches every day. Every time you need to do something, you need to do. Every time you need to talk to that person, you need to talk to. Every time that you need to go out and build that business. Every time you need to get people to buy your product. Every time you need to calibrate. Every time you need to look at yourself. Every time you need to get to a higher level, it's a war of emotions. If you win the battle of emotions, not only will you win being a better person, not only will you win being the best version of yourself, but you'll win the life that you want. Like and subscribe for more. This is just a thought.